14, resumption of second reading debate.
Senator Ludwig.
Deputy President, Labor does stand for the protection of our oceans. We stand for the rights of recreational fishers and we stand for business certainty. Labor has a strong track record of respecting our oceans for all users, and we have a strong track record of basing our decisions on the science. In 2012, a private company sought to introduce a massive super trawler vessel into Australian waters. The Labor government acted to provide certainty for our oceans and for the science. We introduced tough new measures that required proper scientific assessments to be made by an expert panel. That was the responsible thing to do. Almost 2 years later, however, our oceans are vulnerable again. The tough powers that Labor introduced have now lapsed. The Abbott government has had almost 12 months in office to do something to address this gap in our laws. They have had time to boost our ocean defences from the threat of new super trawler vessels. Instead, they've done nothing. This private senator's bill has been in the Senate for months, and they haven't even taken the hint to get on with protecting our oceans. Even with this legislation today, that does the work for them. We all remember that when Labor introduced the tough sanctions against the super trawler in 2012, the Liberals and Nationals voted against the government's measures. 33 members of the House of Representatives and the Senate spoke against Labor's measures to stop the super trawler, all of them Liberals, National Party members. Deep down, the Liberals and the Nationals have always supported removing the vital protections of our oceans. Their DNA on this is unquestionable. As the Hobart Mercury reported on September 9 in 2012, and I quote, Tasmanian Liberal Senator Richard Colbeck told the crowd he supported the super trawler, end of quote. That's why this government hasn't acted on closing the gap in our oceans and bringing back strict protections from future super trawlers. They hoped a new vessel would sidle up over the horizon and quietly start fishing in Australian waters without any scientific checks or balances. Over the last 12 months, the Abbott government has been breaking promises, hurting lower and middle income earners and being incompetent to boot. The Australian people got their first whiff of the twisted priorities of this government with the announcement of the reintroduction of, would you believe it, knights and dames, for the pure farce that's now turned into budget pain. All the while, the Labor Party has been working in the national interest. We've been standing up for jobs, we've been supporting a plan for Australia's future, and we are standing up for the environment and our oceans. What's more, the Prime Minister is now in a desperate attempt to rewrite history. Despite 33 members of his party room speaking against Labor's plan to stop the super trawler, the Prime Minister has tried to spin to say that he supported the ban all along. This is the weather vane of Australian politics in full flight. Before the election, he voted to let the super trawler enter Australian waters unchecked. After the election, he's tried to change his position. Just like hiding the worst of his budget cuts and his plans to destroy Australian jobs before the election, he's now tried to change his position after. Before the election, the Prime Minister voted to keep the super trawler here. After the election, he said, and I quote, it was banned with the support of members on this side of the House. It was banned. It will stay banned. It's worth saying that again. It was banned with the support of members on this side of the House. That's what the Prime Minister said in Hansard, categorically. A blatant mistruth. Clearly incorrect statement from the House, from the Prime Minister. The government has had months to act and they've done nothing. Only Labor is concerned with our oceans and the users of our oceans, and this bill addresses serious concerns in the science and in the community. If the Prime Minister or the Agriculture Minister or the Parliamentary Secretary were serious about protecting our oceans, they would have acted already. I'm not a precious Acting Deputy President. They could have picked up my bill. They could have picked up my bill and claimed that it is their own and got a real win for Australia's oceans. Instead, done nothing. Now, upon reflection of that, you really do wonder whether or not they just like to sit on their hands and do nothing. The bill that I have introduced will restore the tough powers to the Environment Minister to act where new types of fishing operations seek to work in Australia and where uncertainty exists about their conduct. The Environment Minister will again be able to declare particular methods of fishing in consultation with the Fisheries Minister and provide a scientific process to occur for up to 2 years. That's the sensible way of progressing when you've got new things such as this. An expert panel will be constituted and will be able to consider the impacts of the new venture if it is declared. This will provide the community, recreational fishers and businesses alike with the certainty for these declared activities to operate in Australia. What it does certainly allow is for that expert panel to have proper submissions, to look at the scientific evidence, to ensure that there is proper consultation, and this is for both parties and the stakeholders in this debate. It's very important to ensure that the stakeholders, even those people who want to introduce the super trawler, are and do know there is certainty around the process, certainty around consultation, certainty around the expert panel's findings, certainty around science. And the community can also feel assured that they have a clear understanding of what is occurring. Because, Acting Deputy President, it's the surprises that hurt people. Mind you, though, this government is an expert at surprises that hurt people. So it's not unsurprising to me that you do find a government such as this that has ignored the science, ignored the opportunity to look at how they can fix this issue, instead sat on their hands, let it lapse. But I think ultimately what is more galling in all of this is where the Prime Minister stands up and says, it's always been banned, it'll continue to be banned, but that was not what he did when he was called to account. Because when the vote was had in this place, they opposed, they supported the super trawler, they imposed our legislation back then, and they continue to, I think, fudge where their position is. This bill will give the coalition a clear opportunity of putting down their position, explaining to Parliament where they sit in this matter. It's very important that the people in Tasmania, people on the east coast of Australia, those in the South Australian Bight, understand what the process is for a super trawler should it come over the horizon again. I think this government breeds on uncertainty because it wants to be able to deal with it when it occurs rather than have a clear process in place. This legislation focuses on addressing that uncertainty related to the so-called super trawler fishing vessels. Why? Because business does require certainty, the community requires certainty, stakeholders and third parties also require certainty in this debate because people should have the ability to have a say. In short, this legislation will allow the government of the day to stop new super trawlers before they come into Australia, just as Labor did in office. The amendments give the government of the day the power to declare a particular type of fishing activity where it has not been used in Australia previously, and some uncertainty exists around it to ensure proper and thorough expert scientific work is conducted. This has been the case in the past when the government moved to declare the activities that were proposed for the super trawler known as the FV Margiris, or, oddly, temporarily, the FV Able Tasman. This bill will remove a 12-month sunset provision, bringing the new Chapter 5B of the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act back into effect. By removing Division 4 of Part 15B, the Environment Minister's powers to respond to new commercial fishing operations will be restored, as it is currently subject to the sunset clause that is in effect at present. So it's sunsetted now. This will bring that provision back. This means that there is currently no power under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act for the government to act to declare fishing activities, including super trawlers. The bill restores the powers still on the statute books, namely the powers to enable the Minister for Environment, the agreement of the Commonwealth Fisheries Minister, to make an interim declaration that a fishing activity is a prohibited declared commercial fishing activity, while an expert panel assesses the potential environmental impacts of the activity. To enable the Minister for Environment, with the agreement of the Commonwealth Fisheries Minister, to make a final declaration for a period no longer than 24 months that a fishing activity is a prohibited declared commercial fishing activity, and to provide for the establishment of an expert panel in the case of the making of a final declaration, and specify the terms of reference of the panel and its reporting date, with a requirement that a copy of the panel's report be made publicly available, because on this side of the chamber we support transparency, openness and accountability. It also to provide for appropriate procedural fairness protections for declarations affected persons, and to create civil penalty and offence provisions for engaging in a declared commercial activity. These measures are required to address the risk of a new and future super trawler or other new methods of commercial activity that have not previously been used in Australia. It is a precautionary approach. It will better allow community and environmental groups, together with business, to work with a scientific expert panel to assess the true impacts of new and large-scale fishing operations. I would add a note to these amendments that, if passed, it would be prudent for the government to take other action to improve the management of new and proposed fishing activities. The Department of the Environment and the Australian Fisheries Management Authority should establish protocols to better communicate between these two agencies in the operation of the Act. It would be a sensible reform and would be able to be done at the agency level. Surprised they haven't already undertaken that work. Perhaps we'll hear from the Coalition that they have already started to do that work itself. But I would be surprised if they had. This is a coalition that does not act easily and does not seek easy solutions. I understand, of course, there is a view that it would be preferable to just ban super trawlers outright based on their class of vessel. I don't hold this view. The approach I've proposed is logical, sensible, science-based approach that treats each applicant on its merits and on the science. To do otherwise would be anti-business and anti-science. For that reason, I suspect the Greens party may be a little more stricter than the view I've taken, but I wait to hear their view on this. Under this bill, where the science goes, so too does the decision of the agencies. Australia has some of the best managed fisheries in the world. There is, however, a gap in the system in considering the powers of the Environment and Fisheries Ministers to consider new commercial fishing vessels before they arrive and begin to fish. Given the government has failed to act, it is sensible for these powers to be restored. Labor is standing up for the oceans, recreational fishers and local businesses, and I commend the bill to the Senate.